Well, hello everyone. It looks like we finally made it to the end. This is our last video for our online instrument ground school. This is chapter 17, Pilot Potpourri, or in this book it's called IFR Pilot Potpourri. Although if you look at Rod's private pilot book, you'll see a lot of similarities. So just a couple of quick things I wanted to highlight about this chapter. He starts out talking about different kinds of runways, and you've probably seen all three of these kinds of runways here. We've got our visual runway. What does that have? It's basically just got numbers and dashes down the middle, and that's about it. Of course, there's probably lights on the side if it's lit. And then we have our non-precision instrument runway. So what's different there? Now we have our threshold markings, and we have our touchdown zone markings as well. Now remember, what is the touchdown zone? The touchdown zone is the first 3,000 feet of the runway, or sometimes we'll say the first third of a runway if it's smallish. So the touchdown zone markings will be 1,000 foot down the runway is where you're going to get the aiming point. And that's shown pretty well in the precision instrument approach runway. So what does that add? It adds things like these 500 foot markers within the touchdown zone. It also adds things like these side stripes. You might see side stripes, by the way, sometimes in a non-precision instrument runway. I know that if you look in the book, he'll say that they have side stripes on non-precision instrument runways, and sometimes I see them and sometimes I don't. So those are the different kinds of runways. Now, what are some other things that you might notice? So here's a picture of a pretty typical runway. This is a precision instrument runway. And of course, the side stripes are going to help you out in low visibility situations, and you'll be able to a little bit better see the sides of the runway, especially a runway like this, where the sides aren't just grass, etc., etc. He spends a little bit of time talking about lights. Of course, hopefully you all know about lighting systems. If you're pilots, you should know this stuff already. But a couple of quick reminders. On the runway, typically we'll have white lights on the edges, and those will become yellow in the last 1,000 feet or the last third of the runway. And if you look at the runway N identifier lights, the rail lights, they'll be green as you approach and red as you're coming the other way, if you're about to overrun the runway. And of course, as you go to different kinds of airports and various size airports, you're going to see more and more lights. And if you look in your book, you'll see there's some pictures. I remember some years ago when I was flying into Knoxville Downtown Island Airport. I was doing a quick night cross country, and I was continuing from there to the big airport in Knoxville. And we took off, and these things were, I don't know, maybe 10 miles apart, something like that. As soon as we took off, we could immediately see the other airport because it was lit up like Christmas. They had everything. They had runway centerline lightings. They had a nice approach system. I think I could probably even see the Pappy from 10 miles away. It was just incredibly bright. So that's just a quick reminder on those lights. Now, something that you may not be used to seeing, and it's shown at least a little bit here, is taxiway clearance bar lights. So you might see yellow lights running close to the runway. Right? These are just warning you, hey, don't cross over to the runway. And here in this picture, they also have a stop bar. So a stop bar will tell you, hey, when this thing is lit, just stop. Don't proceed past the stop bar. So these are in-ground clearance lights. Why am I bringing this up? Well, is it that I think you guys are going to be flying out of a lot of super big airports that have all these lights? Maybe, maybe not. But these are something you don't typically see as a VFR only pilot. Number one, you tend to not go to the big airports so much. And number two, these are lights that are activated when the RVR is below 600. So when the visibility is really low, that's when they will start to use things like these in-ground lights that will give you your clearance. So hopefully if you're a VFR only pilot, you're not flying around when the weather's that bad. And you may have not seen one of these in action before, unless you saw it when you were traveling on an airline or something like that. All right, other things that he talks about that are more pertinent toward instrument pilots. He talks a little bit about the different kinds of instrument approach systems, the approach lighting systems that you might find. So we have our ALSIF 2, ALSIF 1, SALSER, MALSER, MALS, ODALS, and then just plain old rail lighting. So this is pertinent for you if you're coming in, again, low visibility conditions, and you want to know, what am I looking for? And of course, there are little pictures, little mini pictures on your instrument approach plates as well that will tell you a little bit more about what these look like and what you should expect. So those are pretty much the highlights from Chapter 17, at least the things that apply to instrument pilots more so than others. He talks about things like wake turbulence. You should be familiar with that. And of course, how do you talk to ATC? Now, the one other thing that is not for VFR guys so much is the idea of practicing instrument approaches. He does bring up the fact that if you want to do a practice approach, you want to keep current, that a request for practice instrument approaches is not an instrument clearance. In other words, if you're out of your 6 approaches in 6-month currency, you are perfectly legal, if it's VFR conditions, obviously, to ask for practice instrument approaches, which you could do with an instructor or safety pilot, etc., etc. All right. And that is pretty much the book. And that brings us to the end of our class. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed teaching in this different format. And I think that we might go forward and make this the new normal, if you will. So have a great day. Hope to see you guys in the skies.